Can you imagine facing judgment for the scars you bear from serving your country? Emily Carter slipped into her combat medic uniform, her fingers trembling as she fastened the buttons. The fabric felt heavy with memories of 3 tours in Iraq, where her hands had stitched countless wounds under fire. Today, in a quiet Pennsylvania courthouse, she would wear it to honor her oath, not as a soldier, but as a juror. The medals on her chest glinted faintly, each one a story of sacrifice. Why did this moment feel like stepping onto a battlefield again? The air was thick with anticipation as Emily adjusted her collar, her heart racing with a mix of pride and unease. In the next 20 minutes, her courage would be tested, not by bullets, but by words. What would you do if your service was questioned in front of a room full of strangers? "Are you sure about the uniform?" asked David, her partner, leaning against the bedroom door. His voice was soft, but his eyes betrayed worry, a shadow of concern flickering in their depths. "It matters," Emily replied, her voice steady despite the knot tightening in her stomach. "It reminds me who I am." At 39, Emily had spent 2 years grappling with civilian life in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The transition from military surgeon to a private medical practice was jarring. The Army's rigid structure had given way to endless patient charts and hurried consultations, while the clear mission of saving lives in war zones dissolved into the ambiguity of civilian routines. "You'll be late," David warned, glancing at his watch, his tone gentle but urgent. Emily nodded, catching her reflection in the mirror. The scars on her collarbone, remnants of a roadside bomb in Mosul, peeked above her uniform. She left them visible, badges of survival, not shame. Listeners, put yourself in Emily's shoes as you step into the courthouse. 2 paths lie ahead: wear the uniform proudly, risking scrutiny but honoring your service, or choose civilian clothes to blend in, avoiding attention but hiding your truth. Which would you choose? Comment 1 or 2 below and share your thoughts. And please, hit that subscribe button for daily narrated stories. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and your support brings these powerful tales to life. The Lancaster County Courthouse loomed ahead, its gray stone facade and towering columns radiating authority. Emily climbed the steps, her boots echoing with purpose. Each step a reminder of the countless missions she'd undertaken in far more dangerous places. She had discussed this moment with her therapist, a chance to reclaim her civic duty after feeling adrift since her return. Inside the jury orientation room, she sat among strangers, her uniform drawing curious glances, some filled with respect, others with suspicion. The clerk's instructions droned on, a monotone hum, but Emily listened intently, her military training kicking in, sharpening her focus. She was assigned to a high-profile embezzlement case, expected to last 3 weeks. While others grumbled about missing work, their voices a low murmur of discontent, Emily felt a flicker of calm. This was a mission she could understand, clear, structured, meaningful, a lifeline in the chaos of her civilian life. During a coffee break, an older woman approached, her eyes fixed on Emily's medals, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her purse. "Did you serve?" she asked, her voice quivering with emotion. "3 tours, Iraq. Medical Corps," Emily answered, her tone measured, though her heart quickened at the question. The woman clasped Emily's hand, her grip surprisingly firm, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "My daughter's deployed there now. Thank you." Emily offered a small smile, unease stirring deep within her. She never felt like a hero, just a doctor who did her job, one among many who had served. The moment lingered, a reminder of the invisible threads connecting her past to the present, a fragile bridge between the battlefield and this quiet courthouse hallway. Back in the courtroom, Emily noticed the judge, Olivia Thompson, a woman in her late 40s with a commanding presence and warm brown eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 untold stories. Something about her felt familiar, a faint echo of a memory Emily couldn't quite grasp. "All rise," the bailiff called, his voice cutting through the hum of the courtroom like a blade. Jury selection began, and the defense attorney, Richard Lawson, took center stage. A polished man with silver-streaked hair and a crimson tie, he scrutinized each juror with the precision of a hawk circling its prey. His polished shoes clicked against the hardwood floor as he paced, his sharp eyes scanning for weaknesses, his presence dominating the room. When Emily's turn came, Lawson paused, his gaze lingering on her uniform before flipping open her file. A faint smirk tugged at his lips, as if he'd found a puzzle to unravel. "Carter," he said, his voice smooth but laced with condescension, pronouncing her name like it was a challenge. "You were in the army, correct?" "Yes, sir," Emily replied, her posture rigid, shoulders squared as if bracing for an attack. "3 tours in Iraq." Lawson tilted his head, his smirk widening, a predator sizing up its prey. "And you're wearing this?" He gestured to her uniform with a flick of his hand, as though it were a costume from a thrift store, his tone implying she was out of place. A ripple of whispers spread through the courtroom, the air growing heavy with judgment, the weight of their gazes pressing against Emily's chest. Her breath grew shallow, but she held his gaze, her hazel eyes steady, unwavering. "As a veteran, I believe it's fitting to honor my service while serving my country here," she said, her voice calm but firm, echoing with the weight of her conviction, a quiet defiance in every word. Lawson's smirk didn't waver as he stepped closer, his polished demeanor now tinged with something colder. Disdain, perhaps, or a calculated cruelty. "Fascinating," he drawled, flipping a page in her file with deliberate slowness, the sound of paper rustling amplified in the tense silence. "Your file mentions treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder, correct?" The question landed like a grenade, its shockwave rippling through the room, shattering the fragile calm Emily had clung to. Her heart stuttered, the words slicing through her composure like shrapnel, sharp and unrelenting. Her mind flashed to Mosul, the acrid smell of smoke filling her lungs, the metallic tang of blood on her tongue, the screams of the wounded echoing in her ears as she worked through the night, her hands trembling but steady under fire. She'd fought to save lives, to keep her focus amidst chaos, but now, in this sterile courtroom, her scars felt like a liability, a mark of shame. The whispers grew louder, a juror to her left shifting uncomfortably in their seat, their chair creaking in the silence. "Objection!" The prosecutor, a wiry man with glasses, interjected, his voice sharp, cutting through the murmurs. "This is irrelevant to her qualifications." Lawson raised a hand, unruffled, his confidence unshaken. "I'm merely assessing emotional stability for a complex case, Your Honor," he said, his tone dripping with faux innocence, a mockery of concern. Judge Thompson leaned forward, her warm brown eyes narrowing, her expression darkening like a storm gathering on the horizon, the air around her crackling with authority. "Mr. Lawson, this line of questioning treads on dangerous ground," she said, her voice low but laced with a quiet fury that made the room still. "Ms. Carter's service is a badge of honor, not a flaw." Emily's pulse raced, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, the fabric of her uniform suddenly feeling too tight, too hot, as if it were suffocating her. Lawson's words had peeled back a layer of her armor, exposing the raw, tender parts of her she'd fought so hard to protect. She could feel the eyes of the courtroom on her, some curious, some pitying, others judgmental, their gazes like pinpricks against her skin. Her scars, though hidden beneath her collar, seemed to burn under their scrutiny, a silent reminder of the battles she'd fought and the ones she still faced. Lawson persisted, undeterred by the judge's warning, his voice smooth and unrelenting. "Your Honor, with all due respect, I'm ensuring an impartial jury. Dr. Carter's history of mental health treatment could bias her perspective in a case of this magnitude." The air grew heavier, the tension in the room palpable, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for the storm to break. Judge Thompson's gaze shifted to Emily, her eyes searching, as if trying to unearth a memory buried deep beneath layers of time. "Ms. Carter," she said, her voice softer now, but no less commanding, a lifeline in the chaos. "Which unit did you serve with?" Emily swallowed, her throat dry, but her training kicked in, grounding her, steadying her voice. "The 12th Field Hospital, Your Honor. Forward base in Mosul, 2010 to 2015, with a break in 2013, she replied, her words steady despite the storm raging inside her, a tempest of memories threatening to pull her under. Judge Thompson's face paled, her hands gripping the edge of the bench so tightly her knuckles whitened, her breath catching in her throat. Her warm eyes widened, a flicker of something raw, recognition, perhaps, flashing across her features, a memory breaking through the surface. "We'll take a 20-minute recess," she declared, her voice tight, almost trembling, as she rose abruptly from her seat. The gavel's sharp crack echoed through the room, a punctuation to the sudden silence that followed, a moment frozen in time. Emily sat motionless, the weight of Lawson's words pressing against her like a physical force, a heavy stone on her chest. The courtroom buzzed with speculation, whispers of "what's going on?" and "did you see the judge's face?" swirling around her like a swarm of bees, their voices a low hum of curiosity. She ignored it all, her gaze fixed on the floor, her mind drifting to the chaos of Mosul. She could almost hear the distant thud of mortars shaking the ground, the frantic shouts of her team as they triaged the wounded, the sticky warmth of blood on her hands as she fought to save lives under flickering lights. Lawson's questions had torn open a wound she'd spent years stitching closed, exposing her vulnerability to a room full of strangers, their eyes like spotlights on her pain. Her fingers brushed the edge of her uniform, tracing the outline of a metal pin to her chest, a bronze star awarded for her actions during that attack in Mosul. She hadn't wanted the medal, she'd only wanted to save lives, to keep her team alive through the night. But now, in this moment, she felt as though she were on trial for the very courage that had earned it. Her service turned against her in a cruel twist of fate. During the recess, Emily remained in her seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her breathing shallow, her chest tight with unspoken emotion. The other jurors cast curious glances her way, some whispering to each other, their voices a low murmur, others avoiding her gaze entirely, as if her presence made them uncomfortable. A young woman with a tight bun and a nervous demeanor sat 2 seats away, clutching a notepad, her fingers white-knuckled around the pen. She leaned over hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper, her cheeks flushing with nervousness. I didn't know you were a veteran," she said, her words tentative, as if she were afraid to intrude. "That was brave, what you said." Emily offered a small, tight smile, but the words felt hollow, a bitter taste in her mouth. Brave? She didn't feel brave. She felt exposed, raw, as if Lawson had stripped her bare in front of the world, her scars laid out for all to see. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice distant, her thoughts still tangled in the past, a labyrinth of memories she couldn't escape. The young woman hesitated, then added, her voice trembling with emotion, "My brother's in the Navy. He doesn't talk about it much. I think he's afraid people will judge him, like that lawyer did." Emily's heart clenched, the woman's words striking a chord deep within her, a shared pain resonating between them. "He shouldn't have to hide it," she said softly, meeting the woman's gaze, her hazel eyes filled with a quiet strength. "None of us should." The woman nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, a silent understanding passing between them, a fragile bond forged in the shadow of shared struggles. The bailiff's call to return snapped Emily out of her reverie, her body moving on autopilot as she stood and filed back into the courtroom with the others. The air felt different now, charged with an unspoken tension that made her skin prickle, a storm brewing just beneath the surface. Judge Thompson had regained her composure, her posture regal as she took her seat, but her eyes held a new intensity, a depth of emotion that hadn't been there before, a quiet fire burning in their depths. "Mr. Lawson, before we continue, I must address the court," she said, her voice steady but thick with an undercurrent of emotion that made the room fall silent, every eye fixed on her. Lawson nodded, his earlier confidence replaced by a flicker of unease, his fingers tightening around the edge of his file, a bead of sweat glistening on his brow. "In 2012, the judge began, her gaze distant, as if she were seeing something far beyond the courtroom walls, a memory pulling her back in time. My daughter, Captain Sarah Thompson, was critically wounded in an attack on a Mosul base. The 12th Field Hospital saved her life." The room seemed to freeze, the air electric with shock, as every eye turned to Emily, their gazes like a spotlight on her past. Her breath caught in her throat, memories flooding back like a tidal wave, surgical tents lit by flickering generators, the sharp sting of antiseptic burning her nostrils, a young captain's blood-soaked uniform as she fought to stabilize her, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. Emily's hands trembled in her lap, the weight of the judge's words sinking in, a heavy anchor pulling her into the past. She could see it now, the attack, the chaos, the moment she'd knelt beside Captain Thompson, her gloved hands working frantically to stem the bleeding, the monitor's steady beep a lifeline in the darkness. She remembered the captain's pale face, her lips moving as she whispered, "My team. Are they okay?" Even as her own life hung in the balance, her voice weak but filled with a fierce determination. "Ms. Carter," Judge Thompson continued, her voice softer now, but trembling with emotion, a crack in her composed facade. "Was Captain Sarah Thompson one of your patients?" Emily closed her eyes for a moment, sifting through the blur of faces that haunted her dreams, each one a story of survival or loss. "Captain Thompson, shrapnel to the abdomen and shoulder," she said, her voice quiet but steady. The memory as vivid as if it had happened yesterday, the weight of that night pressing against her chest. "We operated for 6 hours. She was conscious, asking about her team." The judge nodded, her eyes glistening with tears she fought to hold back, a single drop escaping down her cheek, catching the light. "That's her," she said, her voice breaking slightly, a tremor of gratitude in every word. "A fighter like you." The courtroom remained silent, the weight of the revelation hanging heavy in the air, a sacred moment shared among strangers. Emily's chest tightened, a mix of emotions swirling within her, pride, sorrow, and a strange sense of closure she hadn't expected, a piece of her past slotting into place. She'd saved countless lives in Mosul, but this one felt different, personal in a way she couldn't fully grasp, a thread connecting her to the woman on the bench. Judge Thompson took a deep breath, her composure returning as she turned to Lawson, her gaze hardening, a quiet fury burning in her eyes. "You question Ms. Carter's emotional capacity," she said, her voice steady now, but laced with a fierce protectiveness that made Lawson shift uncomfortably in his polished shoes, his confidence crumbling under her scrutiny. "Let me set the record straight. Dr. Carter not only has the strength to serve on this jury, but demonstrated unparalleled courage under fire. She saved my daughter's life when others might have faltered." The words were a lifeline, a shield against the sting of Lawson's earlier attack, but they also brought a flood of memories Emily had fought to bury, the exhaustion that seeped into her bones, the fear that gripped her heart, the relentless pressure of knowing every second could mean life or death, her hands steady despite the trembling in her soul. Lawson's confidence visibly crumbled, his shoulders slumping as he adjusted his tie, his earlier swagger replaced by a flicker of shame, his eyes darting to the floor. "Your Honor, he began, his voice faltering, but the judge cut him off, her voice sharp as a blade, slicing through his excuses. "Enough," she said, her tone brooking no argument, a finality that echoed through the room. Questioning Dr. Carter's stability based on her seeking mental health support disrespects her service and perpetuates a stigma that harms countless veterans. Seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. Emily sat frozen, her hands gripping the edge of her seat, her emotions a tangled knot of vindication and gratitude, a warmth spreading through her chest. The judge's defense was a balm to the wound Lawson had inflicted, a reminder that her struggles didn't diminish her worth, but the pain lingered, a quiet ache that whispered of battles still to come. "Unless you have specific objections to Dr. Carter's ability to evaluate evidence," Judge Thompson continued, her eyes boring into Lawson, a challenge in her gaze, "I suggest you move on." Lawson cleared his throat, his voice quieter now, almost chastened, a shadow of the man who had stood so confidently moments before. "I withdraw my objections, Your Honor," he said, his words a reluctant surrender, a crack in his polished armor. As Lawson stepped back, Emily exhaled, her hands trembling slightly, the tension in her body slowly unwinding, a weight lifting from her shoulders. The judge's eyes, now soft with emotion, met hers, and for a moment, the courtroom seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them. Two women bound by a shared history, a life saved, a debt unspoken. "Dr. Carter, this court honors your service, military and civic," Judge Thompson said, her voice warm, a quiet nod of respect passing between them, a silent promise of understanding. Emily nodded, a lump forming in her throat, the weight of the moment settling deep in her chest, a warmth she hadn't felt in years. She felt seen, truly seen, for the first time since she'd returned home, a veteran, a survivor, a woman who had fought for others and now fought for herself. Her scars a map of her journey, not a mark of shame. During the lunch break, Emily slipped out of the courtroom, her boots echoing down the marble hallway as she sought a quiet corner to collect herself, the noise of the courtroom fading behind her. She found a small alcove near a stained glass window, the sunlight casting fractured colors across the floor, reds, blues, golds, like a mosaic of her scattered emotions, a kaleidoscope of her past and present. She leaned against the cool stone wall, closing her eyes, her breathing uneven, the echoes of the morning's events swirling in her mind. The judge's words echoed in her thoughts, a lifeline she hadn't realized she needed, a beacon in the darkness. But Lawson's attack still lingered, a sharp thorn in her side, a reminder of the prejudice she faced, the stigma that clung to her like a shadow. She thought of her therapist's words from their last session. "You don't have to prove your worth, Emily. You already have." But in that courtroom, under Lawson's scrutiny, she'd felt the need to prove it all over again. To him, to the other jurors, to herself, her heart heavy with the weight of expectation. She opened her eyes, her gaze falling on the window, the light catching the edges of her metals, their gleam a quiet reminder of her strength. She traced the outline of the bronze star with her thumb, its cold metal grounding her, a tangible piece of her past. She wasn't just a veteran with scars and a diagnosis. She was a healer, a fighter, a woman who had faced the worst of humanity and still chose to serve, her resolve a quiet fire burning within her. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts, pulling her back to the present. "Dr. Carter?" She turned to see the bailiff, a stocky man with kind eyes, standing a few feet away, his presence a gentle intrusion. "Judge Thompson requests a private meeting in her chambers," he said, his tone gentle, as if he sensed the storm brewing inside her, the turmoil she fought to contain. Emily nodded, pushing off the wall, her boots steady now as she followed him down the hallway, her heart pounding in her chest. The marble corridors stretched endlessly, the walls lined with portraits of past judges, their stern faces watching her every step, their gazes a silent judgment. She felt a flicker of unease, as if she were walking into another battlefield, one where the weapons were words and memories, not bullets, a different kind of war. The bailiff knocked on a heavy wooden door, then stepped aside as Judge Thompson's voice called, "Come in," her tone warm but authoritative, a summons Emily couldn't ignore. The judge's office was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold formality of the courtroom, a sanctuary amidst the storm. Bookshelves lined the walls, stuffed with leather-bound volumes, their spines worn from years of use, and a large desk sat in the center, cluttered with papers and a framed photo of a young woman in uniform. Captain Sarah Thompson, Emily realized with a jolt, her heart skipping a beat. "Dr. Carter, please sit," Judge Thompson said, her voice gentle as she gestured to a chair across from her desk, her movements graceful, her presence commanding even without the robe. She'd shed her judicial garb, revealing a simple navy blouse and a silver necklace, her presence softer now, more human, a woman rather than a figure of authority. "I don't typically meet jurors privately, but today warrants an exception," she said, her warm brown eyes meeting Emily's, a flicker of gratitude in their depths. Emily nodded, settling into the chair, her hands clasped in her lap, her fingers tracing the edge of her uniform for comfort. "I understand, Your Honor," she said, her voice steady but quiet, a tremor of uncertainty beneath her calm exterior. "Call me Olivia here," the judge said, leaning forward, her hands folded on the desk, her posture open, inviting. "You may not recall, but we met in Mosul. I visited Sarah before her evacuation. You were exhausted, probably at the end of a 48-hour shift, yet you explained her surgery with such care, such compassion, your voice a steady anchor in the chaos." Emily's brow furrowed, a memory surfacing like a ship emerging from fog, the edges of it hazy but growing clearer. "I remember now," she said slowly, her voice tinged with wonder, the pieces falling into place. "You came with a colonel. I thought you were a diplomat." Olivia smiled faintly, a bittersweet edge to her expression, a shadow of the past in her eyes. "A judge has her ways in a crisis," she said, her smile fading as she continued, her voice softening with emotion. "Stateside doctors told me Sarah wouldn't have survived the flight without your intervention." Emily looked down, her hands tightening in her lap, the weight of Olivia's words settling deep in her chest, a heavy stone of responsibility and pride. "I just did my job," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, the memory of that night in Mosul vivid now, sharper than ever. The flickering lights of the surgical tent, the steady beep of the monitor, the way Sarah's hand had gripped hers, weak but determined, as she whispered about her team, her concern for others outweighing her own pain. Olivia's gaze softened, her voice gentle but probing, a quiet invitation to vulnerability. "And how's civilian life treating you?" The question caught Emily off guard, its sincerity disarming her, a crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. She hesitated, her throat tightening, the wall she'd built around her emotions trembling under the weight of the question, threatening to crumble. "It's hard," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly, a raw honesty she couldn't hold back. "Some days I feel like I'm still out there, triaging in the dark, waiting for the next explosion. I thought civilian life would be easier, but it's a different kind of battlefield, one I don't know how to navigate, one where the enemy is invisible, hiding in the shadows of my own mind." Her words hung in the air, raw and unfiltered, and for a moment, she regretted them, fearing she'd revealed too much, her vulnerability laid bare. But Olivia's expression was one of understanding, not judgment, her eyes reflecting a shared pain, a mirror to Emily's own struggles. "Sarah struggled too," Olivia said, her voice soft, her fingers brushing the edge of the framed photo on her desk, a tender gesture filled with love. "She came home broken, not just physically, but emotionally. She'd wake up screaming, reliving that attack in Mosul, the one you saved her from, the memories a relentless torment. It took years of therapy, support groups, family, but she's thriving now, a teacher, married, with a son named Ethan. He's 3, and he calls her his superhero, his little voice filled with awe every time he sees her in her old uniform." Olivia's voice trembled slightly, a tear escaping down her cheek, which she quickly wiped away, a quiet strength in her vulnerability. "But it took time, Emily. And it took people who understood what she'd been through, who didn't judge her for the scars she carried." Emily smiled, warmth spreading through her chest, the image of Sarah as a mother softening the ache in her heart, a flicker of hope igniting within her. "That's wonderful to hear," she said, her voice genuine, a quiet joy in her words. Maybe there was a light at the end of her own tunnel, a future where her scars didn't define her, but instead guided her to something greater, a purpose reborn from the ashes of her past. Olivia leaned closer, her expression earnest, her voice steady but filled with conviction, a fire in her eyes. "What Lawson did today was shameful, but it's not uncommon," she said, her words cutting through the silence like a knife, sharp and unyielding. "Veterans, especially those who seek help, face prejudice, sometimes subtle, sometimes overt, a quiet disdain that seeps into every corner of society. I've seen it in my courtroom, in my daughter's life, in the stories of countless others, their pain dismissed, their courage overlooked. I'd like to offer you a chance to change that." Emily tilted her head, curiosity flickering in her hazel eyes, her mind racing with possibilities, a spark of hope igniting within her. "How?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid to hope, her heart pounding in her chest. "I run a mentorship program for veterans exploring legal careers," Olivia explained, her tone warm but firm, her words a lifeline. "Your experience as a military surgeon, your commitment to civic duty, you'd inspire others, Emily. You've seen the best and worst of humanity, and you've come through it with a strength most people can only dream of, a resilience forged in the fires of war." Emily hesitated, her mind spinning, the idea both foreign and strangely compelling, a new path opening before her. "I'm no lawyer," she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty, her fingers brushing the edge of her uniform as if seeking reassurance, a tangible anchor to her past. "You don't need to be," Olivia said, her smile encouraging, her eyes bright with possibility, a beacon of hope. "We need diverse voices to guide veterans in transition. People who understand the unique challenges they face, who can offer perspective and hope, who can show them that their scars are not a weakness but a strength." "Think about it." Emily nodded, the idea sparking something deep within her, a flicker of purpose she hadn't felt since her days in the field hospital. A fire rekindled in her heart. "I will," she promised, her voice steady now, a quiet determination settling in her chest, a resolve she hadn't felt in years. Olivia stood, her movements graceful, her presence commanding even without the robe, a woman of strength and compassion. "You can step down from the jury if today was too much," she said, her tone gentle but firm, her eyes searching Emily's for any sign of doubt. "No one would judge you for it." Emily straightened her uniform, her posture resolute, her hazel eyes meeting Olivia's with unwavering resolve, a quiet fire burning within her. "With respect, Your Honor, I'd like to serve," she said, her voice steady, a testament to her strength, a promise to herself as much as to the judge. Back in the courtroom, Emily took her seat, her heart still racing from the encounter in Olivia's chambers, the weight of their conversation settling deep within her. The room felt different now, the air charged with a new energy, as if the judge's revelation had shifted the dynamics of the trial itself, a ripple effect that touched every corner of the courtroom. She noticed Lawson whispering urgently to his client, a wiry man in an ill-fitting suit who kept glancing nervously at the jury, his hands fidgeting with the edge of his sleeve. Lawson's earlier swagger was gone, replaced by a tense, almost frantic energy, his hands gesturing animatedly as he spoke, his voice a low hiss that didn't carry. Emily watched him closely, her military-honed instincts kicking in, her mind analyzing every detail, a quiet suspicion taking root. What was he so worried about? Had the judge's words shaken him that deeply, or was there something more at play, a hidden agenda lurking beneath the surface? The thought lingered, a thread of suspense weaving through her mind as the trial resumed, the bailiff calling for order, his voice a steady anchor in the storm. Jury selection continued, but Lawson's demeanor had changed, his questions to the remaining potential jurors less aggressive, his tone more subdued, a shadow of the man who had challenged Emily so cruelly. He occasionally glanced at her, his expression unreadable, a mix of curiosity and perhaps regret, a flicker of something human beneath his polished exterior. Emily kept her gaze forward, her hands folded in her lap, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts, a storm of emotions she fought to contain. She thought of Sarah, of the mentorship program, of the young woman in the jury pool whose brother was in the Navy. She thought of her own struggles, the sleepless nights, the panic attacks, the way she'd flinch at loud noises, expecting an explosion that never came, her body still wired for war. But she also thought of her triumphs, the lives she'd saved, the patients who'd thanked her with tears in their eyes, the quiet strength that had carried her through the darkest moments, a fire that refused to be extinguished. She was more than her trauma, more than Lawson's cruel assumptions. She was a healer, a veteran, a woman who refused to break, her scars a testament to her resilience, not her weakness. By the end of the day, the jury was set, Emily among them, her name read aloud by the clerk in a monotone voice that belied the significance of the moment, a quiet victory in the face of adversity. She felt a quiet sense of pride as she stood with the others, her uniform a silent testament to her resilience, a symbol of the battles she'd fought and won. But the day wasn't over yet. 2 days later, during a break in the trial, Emily stood in the hallway, sipping a cup of lukewarm coffee, the bitter taste grounding her as her mind replayed the events of jury selection. The trial had begun in earnest, the prosecution presenting evidence of embezzlement, forged documents, hidden accounts, a web of deceit that spanned years, a trail of greed that left lives in ruins. Emily listened intently, her analytical mind dissecting each piece of evidence, her training as a surgeon translating seamlessly to this new battlefield, her notes a map of the case's complexities. She watched the defendant, a man who hid his guilt behind a mask of indifference, his eyes cold and calculating, a stark contrast to the warmth she'd seen in the soldiers she'd treated. As she stood there, lost in thought, the hum of the courthouse a distant murmur, Lawson approached, his posture hesitant, his crimson tie slightly askew, a crack in his polished facade. "Dr. Carter, may I have a moment?" he asked, his voice low, devoid of its earlier arrogance, a quiet vulnerability in his tone. Emily nodded warily, her coffee cup warm against her hands, her senses on high alert, her instincts sharp. "I owe you an apology," he said, his eyes meeting hers, a flicker of sincerity in their depths that caught her off guard, a rare glimpse of the man beneath the lawyer. "My questions were out of line. I didn't understand the impact until now." Emily studied him, searching for any sign of insincerity, her years in the field teaching her to read people under pressure, to see through the masks they wore. "What changed?" she asked, her voice calm but probing, her hazel eyes narrowing slightly, a quiet challenge in her gaze. Lawson sighed, his shoulders slumping, his gaze distant as if he were seeing something far beyond the hallway, a memory pulling him back. "My cousin, Daniel, came back from Afghanistan last year," he said, his voice heavy with emotion, a weight he'd carried in silence. "He's struggling, nightmares, anxiety, the works. But he won't get help because he thinks it'll ruin him, make him look weak, a fear that's kept him trapped in his own mind." When Judge Thompson spoke about the stigma, I realized I've been part of the problem, perpetuating the very shame I've seen destroy him. Emily's expression softened, the tension in her shoulders easing as she listened, her heart aching with a familiar pain. She knew that struggle all too well. The fear of being seen as broken, the shame of needing help, the way society turned a blind eye to the invisible wounds of war, dismissing them as weakness. "It's not just him," she said, her voice gentle but firm, her words carrying the weight of her own journey, a truth she'd fought to embrace. "It's a culture. We're taught to be strong, to push through, but sometimes strength means asking for help, admitting you can't do it alone." Lawson nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, his polished facade cracking under the weight of his realization, a man confronting his own blindness. "How can I help him?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, a plea for guidance, a desperate need to make things right. Emily set her coffee cup down, her hands steady now, her voice calm and reassuring, a quiet strength in every word. "Be patient," she said. "Don't push him. Let him come to you when he's ready. And when he is, point him to the VA support groups. They saved me. There's one in Lancaster that meets on Thursdays. The coordinator's name is Lisa. She's helped countless veterans find their way. I can give you her contact if you'd like." Lawson offered a tight smile, gratitude flickering in his eyes, a weight lifting from his shoulders as he nodded. "Thank you, truly," he said, his voice sincere, a quiet promise to do better, to be better, for his cousin and for himself. Emily watched him go, a sense of purpose stirring within her, a quiet realization taking root, a seed of hope in the darkness. For the first time since she'd returned home, she felt that her scars, her story, her struggles had power beyond herself, a light that could guide others through their own darkness. She wasn't just a veteran with a past, she was a bridge, a guide, someone who could help others navigate the shadows she'd fought so hard to escape, her pain transformed into purpose. The trial stretched over 12 days, each one a test of focus and endurance, a marathon of evidence and emotion. Emily approached her juror role with the precision of a surgeon, dissecting evidence with care, her notes a map of the case's complexities, a puzzle she was determined to solve. She listened as the prosecution laid out their case. Wire transfers, falsified invoices, a trail of greed that left employees destitute, their lives upended by one man's ambition. She watched the defendant, a man who hid his guilt behind a mask of indifference, his eyes cold and calculating, a stark contrast to the warmth she'd seen in the soldiers she'd treated, a reminder of the corruption she'd witnessed in war zones. During breaks, Emily found herself bonding with the other jurors, their initial wariness giving way to respect, a quiet camaraderie forming among them. The young woman with the Navy brother, her name was Clara, became a quiet ally, often sitting beside Emily during deliberations, her notepad filled with meticulous observations, her presence a steady comfort. "You're good at this," Clara said one day, her voice tinged with admiration as they reviewed a stack of financial records, the numbers a labyrinth of deceit. "You see things others miss." Emily smiled, a flicker of pride warming her chest, a rare moment of lightness amidst the weight of the trial. "I'm used to looking for patterns," she said, her voice soft but steady, her mind sharp. "In surgery, you can't miss a single detail. It's life or death." Clara nodded, her eyes wide, a new respect in her gaze, a quiet awe for the woman beside her. "I'm glad you're here," she said, her voice sincere, and Emily felt a flicker of belonging, a sense that she was exactly where she needed to be, a piece of her purpose slotting into place. The trial wasn't without its challenges, each day a new test of her resolve. On the fifth day, a piece of evidence, a recorded phone call, revealed the defendant's callous disregard for his victims, his voice dripping with arrogance as he laughed about their plight, his words a cruel mockery of their suffering. Emily's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms, a wave of anger surging through her, a fire in her chest. She thought of the soldiers she'd treated, the ones who died because of greed, contractors cutting corners, supplies delayed, lives lost to someone's bottom line, their sacrifices reduced to numbers on a ledger. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus, her training kicking in as she channeled her anger into clarity, a surgeon's precision guiding her. She couldn't let her emotions cloud her judgment. Not here, not now, but the memory lingered, a fire in her chest that refused to be extinguished, a reminder of why she'd chosen to serve in the first place, a promise to fight for justice in every form. As the trial neared its end, Emily's role as a juror became a lifeline, a way to reclaim the purpose she'd lost in civilian life, a beacon in the darkness. She found herself speaking up more during deliberations, her voice steady and confident, her insights guiding the group through the tangle of evidence, a steady hand in the storm. The other jurors began to look to her for clarity, their trust in her growing with each passing day, a quiet respect in their eyes. Clara, in particular, became a quiet source of support, often sharing small smiles or nods of encouragement as they worked through the case, a silent partnership that grounded Emily. She felt a flicker of gratitude, a sense that she wasn't alone, that her experiences, her trauma, her resilience, had value here, in this room, among these strangers who had become allies, a newfound family forged in the crucible of justice. After 8 grueling hours of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict, guilty on 4 counts, not guilty on 1, a decision that felt like a small victory in the face of so much wrong. Emily felt a quiet satisfaction as they filed back into the courtroom, her uniform a silent testament to her journey, a symbol of the battles she'd fought and won. As the verdict was read, she watched Lawson, her eyes tracing the lines of his face for any sign of the man who'd challenged her so cruelly on that first day, searching for the arrogance that had once defined him. He accepted the verdict with quiet professionalism, a far cry from the swagger he'd displayed during jury selection, his shoulders slumped, his gaze distant. His eyes met hers for a moment, a flicker of respect passing between them, a silent acknowledgement of the growth they'd both undergone, a bridge built from the ashes of conflict. Emily nodded slightly, a gesture of closure, a recognition that even the most hardened hearts could change when faced with the truth, a quiet hope for the future. After the trial, Judge Olivia invited the jurors to her chambers to thank them for their service, her warm brown eyes filled with gratitude as she shook each of their hands, her presence a quiet comfort. Clara lingered for a moment, her voice soft as she turned to Emily, her eyes glistening with emotion. "Thank you," she said, her words heavy with meaning, a quiet promise in her gaze. "For being here, for speaking up. I think I'm going to call my brother tonight. Tell him it's okay to get help, that he doesn't have to fight alone." Emily's throat tightened, a wave of emotion washing over her as she squeezed Clara's hand, her heart swelling with pride. "You're a good sister," she said, her voice thick with feeling, a quiet joy in her words, a moment of connection that felt sacred. As the others left, Judge Olivia asked Emily to stay, her expression warm but expectant, a new chapter waiting to unfold, a future filled with possibility. "I'm joining the mentorship program," Emily said, her voice firm, a quiet determination shining in her hazel eyes, a resolve forged in the fires of her journey. Olivia's face lit up, a smile spreading across her lips, a spark of joy in her gaze. "I knew you'd have much to offer," she said, her voice filled with pride, a quiet celebration of Emily's choice. Emily continued, her words steady but filled with purpose, a fire in her heart. "I'm also leaving private practice. I'll work part-time at the VA hospital, developing PTSD treatment programs, helping others find the peace I've been searching for." Olivia's eyes widened, a flicker of admiration in her gaze, a quiet awe for the woman before her. "That's bold," she said, her tone warm, a quiet respect passing between them, a shared understanding of the courage it took to choose such a path. "It's not about courage," Emily corrected, her voice soft but resolute, a quiet truth in her words. "It's purpose. I've been splitting my military self from my civilian self, like they're enemies, fighting a war within me. Now I see my trauma as a tool to help others, a light to guide them through their own darkness." Olivia nodded, her expression one of deep understanding, her hands folded on the desk as she listened, a quiet pride in her gaze. "And Lawson?" Olivia asked, her voice curious, a faint smile tugging at her lips, a spark of amusement in her eyes. "He apologized," Emily said, her tone thoughtful, her mind drifting back to their conversation in the hallway, the memory a quiet anchor. "His cousin's struggling. Sometimes people need to face their own blindness to see the truth, to understand the impact of their words." Olivia's smile widened, a quiet laugh escaping her lips, a moment of lightness amidst the weight of their conversation. "Even arrogant attorneys," she said, her tone light but filled with meaning, a shared understanding passing between them, a quiet joy in the growth they'd witnessed. Emily nodded, a flicker of amusement in her hazel eyes, a sense of closure settling deep in her chest. A chapter closed, a new one beginning. A week later, Emily attended the mentorship program's first session, her heart pounding with a mix of nerves and excitement, a new beginning on the horizon. Among the veterans was a familiar face, Sarah Thompson, now radiant with health, her smile bright as the morning sun. "Dr. Carter," Sarah greeted, her handshake warm, her eyes filled with gratitude, a quiet strength in her presence. "Mom said you'd be here. I wanted to join this first meeting, to thank you in person." Emily's throat tightened, a wave of emotion washing over her as she shook Sarah's hand, her heart swelling with pride. "Captain Thompson, you look incredible," she said, her voice thick with feeling, a smile breaking through, a moment of joy shared between them. "Thanks to you," Sarah said simply, her eyes glistening with gratitude, a quiet promise in her gaze. "It's just Sarah now. And I'm just Emily," she replied, her smile widening, a sense of connection blooming between them, a bond forged in the crucible of survival. Another figure approached, a young man, hesitant, his posture tense, whom Emily guessed was Lawson's cousin, Daniel, his eyes shadowed with the weight of his own struggles. More veterans arrived, each carrying stories of service and survival, their faces etched with resilience, a quiet strength in their presence. As the session began, Emily surveyed the room, her heart full, a sense of belonging settling deep within her. Her uniform hung in her closet now, no longer needed to anchor her identity, a symbol of a past she'd made peace with. Here, among those who understood the cost of service, she found what she'd sought since returning home, not just belonging, but purpose reborn from the courage that sustained her in Iraq, a fire that burned brighter than ever. That courage wasn't just for war. It was for facing prejudice, healing wounds, and building bridges, a legacy of service that extended beyond the battlefield. At the back, she spotted Lawson, not as an attorney, but as a supporter, standing by Daniel, his presence a quiet testament to his growth. Their eyes met, and Emily nodded, a silent acknowledgement of shared growth, a bridge built from the ashes of conflict, a hope for a better future. When it was her turn to speak, Emily rose, her voice steady but rich with emotion, a quiet power resonating in the room, a testament to her journey. "Our scars don't define us," she said, her words carrying the weight of years, a truth forged in the fires of her past. a light for others to follow. It's what we do with them that shapes who we are. The room was silent, every face reflecting her truth, a shared understanding that transcended words. For the first time since Iraq, Emily felt whole, not despite her past, but because of it, a tapestry of experiences woven into a single story of service. A surgeon, a veteran, a mentor, a citizen, every piece of her integrated, a mosaic of resilience and hope. But the journey doesn't end here. Reflect on this. What scars do you carry, and how can they become your strength? Share your story in the comments. We're listening, and your voice matters, a chance to connect, to heal, to grow together. Daily Narrated Stories is dedicated to bringing you tales like Emily's, stories of courage, redemption, and hope that remind us what it means to be human, to rise above our struggles and find purpose in our pain. We're on a mission to reach 1,000 subscribers, and we need you to make that dream a reality. Subscribe now, comment 1 or 2 for Emily's choice, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it, someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. Don't wait. Time is fleeting, and your support fuels these life-changing narratives, stories that inspire, uplift, and transform. Join us today, and let's rise together, a community bound by the power of story. Music fades in, soft and uplifting. Not all battles are fought with guns. Not all scars are seen when the world misunderstands. Stand tall, don't turn and run. Your courage never fades, it shines. From war zones to courtrooms, from pain to purpose found. In healing self, you heal the world, a truth that knows no bounds. Music swells, fading to black with text. Subscribe to Daily Narrated Stories. Be part of the journey.